Of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Remember back when Lindsey Graham and virtually every Republican senator, every Republican governor, honestly, the entire Republican establishment, every right-wing group, every politician, all of them whining that there were too many entitlements for those people, those lazy people, because they won't go back to work after the pandemic. And that extra $300 a month that the federal government was putting on top of the paltry state unemployment insurance was just making people lazy, keeping them on the dole. Remember that? Do you remember the whole spiel and how it was why we couldn't get people to come back to those crummy jobs that they can't seem to fill at the bottom of the economy? Do you remember that? Remember all of the rhetoric? Well, the reason employers are having such a hard time is because we're making it too easy on them because they're really lazy people. Remember that? Remember how they said that if we cut that unemployment aid, if we cut that help, cut people off at the knees, that get them off get them off the sideline and back into the game. I always love the game analogies that they throw out. And I remember the rhetoric of the economy's going to rebound and everything's going to be great, all of that. Well, today I was spending a little time, because this is what I do, reading through some of the Bureau of Labor Statistics stories. Yes, that is the story of my life. It seems much like, virtually every Republican talking point, the opposite seems to have happened. In the states that did what Lindsey Graham and the rest of the Republican establishment wanted, which is, chop people off at the knees and make them desperate enough to go back to those crummy jobs, the opposite has actually happened. Those states have had slower growth. They have more job openings, I guess, and less people filling them. And here's the punchline. They have the highest quit rates by far. And you go, gee, I wonder, why would that be? And I remember saying at the beginning, when Lindsey Graham and his cabal of kooks were claiming that this was going to rebound the economy and we're going to get those lazy people back to work. I'm going, no, that's not how it works. You entice them back. You got to make those jobs better. Look, I've been talking for all 16 years I've been doing this show about jobs got to get better. People had a little bit of time away from those crummy jobs and dealing with people, especially in the service industry, the low-wage service industry, where people have just had enough. I'll tell you right now, honestly, I don't know that you could pay me enough to go be a waiter in a restaurant or work in a fast food place and to have to deal with some of the crackpots you come up against every day. I don't know that there's enough. And then you're surprised that nobody wants to do it. And I've been saying for the longest time, this doesn't work. Make those jobs better. If you make those jobs better, if those are living wage jobs, one that people actually get, better lives out of, you shouldn't have a hard time attracting people to them. And the stories that we've heard come out are clear. People are like, look, I got off the treadmill a little bit. We cut back on some stuff that we didn't need. And staying home with the kids and having a life now matters. That's not a bad thing. And then the other part, and the one that I think is the reason I make the argument for more generous unemployment benefits as a whole for everybody, not just at special times like a global pandemic, is that it gives people an opportunity to be a little choosier. To go, you know what? I don't know that I want to rush to take the first job that becomes available and end up making myself miserable. I want to find something that I want to do, something that is going to compensate me at a rate that I want, not at, right now I have to do this. And I think a lot of people, during this pandemic have reprioritized their lives. And the employment class, they better come around quick that this may be the new normal. People going, you know what? I can get by on less. I'll just consume less. Now, oddly enough, and this is where some of the Bureau of Labor Statistics stuff is actually kind of interesting and telling, in that the states that did not take the $300 away immediately. Now, understand, September 6th, the whole program ended anyway. So this was just a look back at the numbers and how early in June you had people cutting them off. You didn't see the growth that they promised us, happening in those states that took the money away. But in the states that kept giving the $300 extra on unemployment, they actually saw more job growth. They actually saw more people re-entering the workforce and better economic outcomes. And this isn't rocket science. Don't need to be a genius to figure this one out. It's not that hard. You don't need to be Magellan to discover the reality that if you give people money, they're going to spend it in the local economy, and that spending, that economic activity, well, creates jobs because people want to service that economic demand, and they figure that out. And they entice people to come back to work to get that money. I mean, this isn't, look, even I understand it. So this can't be that difficult. And yet our elected leaders, the people we put up on the high horse, the folks who are in our ivory towers, who look down their nose at the rest of us working people, think that, that little extra was too much, might spoil us. Just like the extra $300 per kid per month to make sure that kids get, cereal in the morning, a pair of shoes to wear to school. Oh, I don't know. Maybe get to go see a movie or do something outside of just basic, roof overhead, food on the table. But I'm looking at this and I'm going, stupids. Putting money into the economy is good for the economy. It works. A consumer-based economy needs demand, which is why, and this for my conservative friends who are fuming at the mind right now, this is not a hippie liberal plan. This was actually the brainchild of Uncle Milty. Milton Friedman, the right-wing stalwart economist, the guy who basically everything that conservatives believe in economics comes from Uncle Milty. He was the guy who came up with the concept of a negative tax, which he was going to give every person $6,000. Now, again, this is going back to late 60s, early 70s. That was a ton of money. But he was going to give each person $6,000. So if you were a husband, wife, 2 kids, $6,000 apiece, $24,000 a year. And there was a calculation where if you worked and you made a lot of money, they would claw some of it back. But they put a baseline. This is what Uncle Milty said we needed to have people to be able to participate in the economy. Now, this wasn't some hippie liberal, some soft, we need to take care of people. It wasn't, we care about the children. It was none of that because they honestly could care less about the children. This was about capitalism. This was about we need business, and business needs consumers, and business needs profit, and business needs money. And how do you get money? Well, you fleece consumers. So Uncle Milty got it decades ago. Our Republican senators and governors, they didn't. They like punishment. They like to be punitive. Especially when you're talking about, I don't know, those workers. Because when it comes to our billionaire class, now understand the pandemic, oh my gosh, the pandemic has been phenomenal for our billionaire class. We now have, did you know this? Did you know we now have 745 certified billionaires? Yes, they've got the seal of approval. They are 745 of them. You can fit them in a pretty good sized room. But just during the pandemic period, our 745 billionaires lined their pockets with an extra $2.1 trillion with a T. $2.1 trillion. That is 12 zeros. Or it's 11. It's a 2, a 1, and 11 zeros. You'd get carpal tunnel just writing that out. But you don't see any Republicans going, hey, hey, we got to claw some of that back. They're gonna get lazy if we keep giving them all this. You don't hear anyone saying on the right, hey, this is a bad thing. You don't know, because this is what they want. They want the two Americas. They want the kind of inequality that we're saddled with. They want desperate working class people so that they can shame them and guilt them and force them into crummy jobs. Now remember, we just came out of a period where those folks who were feeding us, those folks who were taking care of us, those people we were calling heroes, now they're saying, hey, we'd like to make a living wage, please. We'd like to feed our kids. We'd like to, I don't know, not do as well as our 745 billionaires who pocketed an additional $2.1 trillion. But we think a couple of bucks might be helpful, might make our lives a little better, might make our lives a little easier, make our kids' opportunities for the future a little better. Good stuff. Yet, I'm not seeing any Republicans signing on to the Democrats' bill on taxing our billionaires. Now, as I said, our 745 certified, USDA choice certified, $2.1 trillion. The Democrats are going, you know what? If we can't raise taxes on the wealthy, as they've laid it out, people making over individuals making over $400,000, couples making over $450,000, we got to go after where the money is. And our 745 billionaires, there's a lot of it. 2.1 trillion extra dollars. This was above and beyond the trillions they already had. This was a sweetener during the pandemic. Nobody's calling them heroes. And you know what? They don't care to be called heroes. They don't need names. They don't need pats on the back. They don't need platitudes. They don't need any of that stuff because they got the money. They only seem to give us working people those kind of titles that we seem to think are important. But when it comes to actually taking care of people, to actually doing the things that we need to do, well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's the world we live in. And today, you've got in Congress, the Democrats are trying to move this wealth tax bill on just these 745, saying, look, you billionaires did really well. We're going to tax some of that additional gains, the pandemic windfall you got, and we're going to invest in, I don't know, the things that we need. Getting Granny some new chompers and maybe letting her hear a little bit. Investing in early childhood education, little something. Child care, little something to help families get by. We're going to invest in, I don't know, doing something on the climate change front. We're going to invest in that social safety net that's been destroyed in the last 45 years. And why? Why? Well, because we got to give our billionaires more. They need more. See, here's the thing. 2.1 trillion is a lot, but they wanted 2.5. They're a little disappointed. If we just sacrificed a little bit more, seriously, if we just sacrificed just a little bit more, they could have got to 2.5. They could have got to 2.5. And if we really sacrificed, they could have gotten to 3. That's their thinking. Their thinking is they don't care about you or me. They don't care about who's going to show up and come to work. Which is why this whole thing is so infuriating. And we're stuck watching these games being played out. I look at the thing with Manchin, and Manchin's the whole thing's infuriating to me. Because here you got a guy who is a millionaire, a multimillionaire, on his gigantic yacht, telling poor people, sorry, it's a slippery slope. We can't allow the extra $250 or $300 a month per kid to go into families to help them get by because it would just make you lazy. We can't have a welfare state. That would be bad. From a guy who literally is probably one of the wealthiest guys in West Virginia, which happens to be one of the poorest states in the country, where you go, you pass significant legislation, you pass some of Biden's Build Back Better, or even Build Back a little bit better, it's going to make things better in the state of West Virginia because you could bring those jobs, those incredible green jobs that could be created if we just invested in it. Instead, what we're talking about is, will Joe Biden leave the Democratic Party? Or will Joe Manchin leave the Democratic Party? Because evidently the big headline today was Joe Manchin offered to leave. I mean, this is just, it's one of those games that's almost funny, but it's sad because we're so easily divided. We're easily pitted against each other by these nonsense stories where at the end of the day, the thing that matters, and this is what when I have these talks with people about, well, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're this, you're that. No, I'm a guy who understands where the money goes. It's all about following the money. It's about the economy, stupid. And it's always, as much as I don't like James Carville, he was right. It's the economy, stupid. It always is the economy, stupid. It's always the jobs. It's always the wages. It's always the benefits. It's always how families are going to be able to get by and do better. Everything comes down to that. And until we wake up and stop being pitted against each other on nonsense issues, next time, our billionaire class will get to 2.5 trillion, maybe even 3. I remember back in the 80s, Rolling Stone, I think it was the mid 80s, Rolling Stone magazine did a piece that, wanted to get Paul McCartney to $1 billion. And it was this kind of, you send Paul money because he needs it to get to $1 billion. And it was a joke because, here's a guy who, has a lot of money, and they're going, no, poor people, send him money because he needs to get to this level. Because at the time it was so comical and so incredibly ridiculous. But here we're in this moment. We got 745 of these billionaires who, well, I don't see them voluntarily helping. I see Jeff Bezos taking his phallic rocket into space. I see Elon Musk taking people around. I see Bezos taking Shatner into space. It's crazy. And we don't seem to get upset about it. We're still angry about the person behind us in line who has the EBT card. See how crazy this is? We need to wake up. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Standing up, and the union gives a voice to win on the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1949. That was the day Americans awoke to fears the nationwide steel strike would spread rapidly to include key fabrication plants. 500,000 steelworkers had joined 400,000 coal miners on strike the morning before. The miners resolved to defend their $100 a month pension, instituting what John L. Lewis called the no-day work week, emboldened the steelworkers to walk out of the mills. Within 24 hours, 96% of all steel production in the country was completely shut down. United Steelworker contracts were due to expire on the 15th, but the writing was on the wall. The mill owners decried anything close to mine pensions as nothing short of socialistic and refused to budge in negotiations. United Steelworkers President Phil Murray thundered that those companies that failed to agree to demands for non-contributory pensions and insurance would be shut down. But militants warned that President Truman's fact-finding board had already watered down strike demands. The president's board had been established to put off 2 previous strike deadlines. The guidelines it issued only encouraged steel magnates to stand tough against United Steelworker demands. These included a 30-cent raise plus increased company insurance and pension contributions. Now, it had become a defensive struggle over whether steelworkers would have to begin contributing to health and pension plans through wage cuts. By the time steelworkers ended their strike 42 days later, they had won the $100 a month pension minus what they would receive from Social Security, and they had to begin contributing to a health insurance plan with no wage increase at all. Still, workers celebrated that they had successfully defended the United Steelworkers against the all-out union-busting drive.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're seeing strikes all across the country, and a good thing. Look, right now there are in excess of 100,000 workers either on strike or have authorized a strike because, you know what? They're fed up. Enough already. And this is what I've been talking about for the longest time. You know, if you remember during the pandemic, we kept calling them essential workers, and they were heroes, and all of this stuff, heaped praise on them. Lots of platitudes, lots of pats on the back. But when it comes to saying, hey, we'd like to support our family, we'd like a living wage, we'd like health care, maybe a little pension security, I don't know, maybe a little something. Well, that's a bridge too far. And I've been saying for the longest time, this is what we do with the people that we call heroes. Lots of platitudes, lots of, hey, thanks for being here, lots of applause. But when it comes to, I don't know, following up, like we've done with our soldiers, like we did with the 9/11 responders, well, maybe not so much help. And here to share some thoughts on, well, what we do to our heroes, I've asked John Feal to come talk with us. John is one of the 9/11 responders injured during the response, a kidney donor and a champion for the heroes we so easily forget. He's also the founder, president, chairman, basically chief cook and bottle washer at the FealGood Foundation. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
So I'm looking at all of the stuff that's going on, all of these strikes, all of the activism that's going on, and I keep coming back to this moment of, I remember calling them heroes, I remember calling them essential, and everybody praising them. But now that they want something, can't do that. Sorry. Something you understand.
Yeah, the beautiful thing is that it's our birth-given right to strike, and that's when we force change. And kudos to anybody who goes out on a Saturday or stays after work and joins those who are striking. And that's the American way. That's democracy at work, and that's us forcing elected officials to do the right thing. We're all guilty of calling essential workers. Remember when we were all saying they were frontline workers? Those doctors, those nurses, those people that were on the front lines. We're wrong. I thought about this long and hard. They were our last line of defense. Right. The American people were the frontline workers, and we failed them. And we made their job that much harder, and we could have fixed this pandemic a long time ago. But then it spiraled out of control. And now you see all of these strikes and all of these labor issues because the pandemic shut down the machine, and it's hard to get the machine up and running again. And just like 9/11, all of these men, firefighters, cops, construction workers, volunteers, they got sick. They lost their jobs, and they were hailed as heroes. But once you become a financial strain on the system, you get kicked to the curb really quick. Same thing with veterans when they come home from war and they lose a leg and an arm. And, we put them on that pedestal for 2 or 3 weeks until the next story comes along. Yep. And, we've helped now pass 13 pieces of legislation, and mostly because of blue-collar workers. And we're going to continue to fight for them. We're going to continue to advocate for anybody in labor. And, it was labor who helped us get the 9/11 bills passed in D.C. and in Albany and in New Jersey and in Michigan. So this is something that's dear to my heart.
No, and it's one of those things where, I keep asking the question. I've been doing this for years. Look, I grew up in the early 70s. I came awake in the early 70s at the end of Vietnam, where I saw what we did to our soldiers. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. So what I saw of the military, I saw guys with broken minds, broken bodies, drug and alcohol problems, just dumped back into our housing project, and no help whatsoever. And, that's one of those things that has stuck with me. And every time we send someone into harm's way, I say, if we're willing to send them, are we willing to take care of them on the other end? Are we? If we're willing to send people into a pile of destruction like you went into, are we willing to take care of them? And the answer invariably is always no, John.
No. But, Rick, that's the true cost of war is from the time that recruiter gets that kid at the mall right? And then they send them off to basic training, and then AIT, and then a duty station, and then probably war. The true cost of war is when they come home. And, Americans are guilty of, and it's not malicious. There's no harm intended, but we're programmed to say thank you for your service, and it stops there. Thank you for your service. It should be thank you for your service, thank you for your sacrifice. What can I do to help you? What can I do to alleviate the issues you're coming home with no arms, no legs, post-traumatic, burn pit, cancers, respiratory illnesses because the federal government lied. We need to do a better job. And, we might not see it in our lifetime, Rick, but I believe change is coming. And this country's going through some difficult growing pains right now. And if everybody like you and others continue to chip away, we're going to make life easier for the next generation.
I sure hope so, because I keep asking this question. Every time something comes up, I go, if this is how we're going to treat this generation of heroes, who's going to be the next one to step up in the next moment of crisis, looking back and going, look what you did to those guys. I don't want to be that. So for me, this is not just being moral or being a decent person. This is looking towards the future and going, hey, we might need quote unquote heroes in the future, so we should probably take care of the ones we're calling heroes today.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, I go back to, my grandfather told me stories of how they were taken care of after World War II. This country repeats its mistakes. But I mean, look at a cop who was in a shootout and got shot. And, a year later, the guy's losing his house and can't afford to put food on the table. Individually or on the large scale, we continue to fail these men and women. And it's not just veterans, and it's not just firefighters and cops. It's those in labor, those who got hurt on the job. We just need to do a better, we label each other too much. And I believe politics spreads its ugly wings into everyday society. And, when you look at the top echelon of leadership, it's unions, it's Democrat. And then when you look at the membership, it's a lot of Republicans. And now you're seeing a lot of Republican states really basically kill off labor. And a lot, and I don't say this lightly. I really don't say this lightly, but, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. We just got to do a better job of treating each other.
No, you're absolutely right. And I say this, about the pandemic. We've got to be respectful of each other, because one of the things that an article I read with you in it talking about COVID, I said, you're afraid of nothing, but you said you were scared of COVID because look, you're somebody who has some pre-existing conditions, and this is one of these moments where I go, we need to be more respectful of each other. Look, I hate wearing masks as much as anybody, but the reality of you and I are in the same room, out of respect for you, if not for myself, I'm going to be wearing the mask because I don't know if you have a problem. I don't know if you're immune suppressed or any of that stuff. I don't know where that level of respect disappeared. I'm still struggling to figure that out.
Yeah, if I go back 20 years ago, we should have bottled September 12th. And I don't think wearing a mask would be an issue. But you're right. I wear a mask everywhere I go. I'm vaccinated. I already had it. I've donated plasma now 8 times. If you don't take, listen, I had COVID and pneumonia. It almost killed me. It scared the snot out of me. You know what? I really, my sympathy level is not that high anymore for those who continue to question this.
Yeah.
And, I had a conversation the other day in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and the person said, I'm still doing research on it. And I politely said, about 4 or 5 billion people in the world now are vaccinated. How much more research do you have to do?
And what research are you doing? Give me a reading list of the research that you're doing. I want to see what YouTube channel, I want to see what Facebook posts you're reading as your research.
Well, I'm pretty sure he wasn't reading out of the New England Medical Journal, right? So, it's hard to have a conversation, but at least I'm willing to have these conversations. That's another problem, Rick. Nobody wants to stop and have the difficult conversations anymore. If your narrative doesn't fit my narrative, I hate you, I dismiss you, you go on with your life, I go on with mine, and I'm still going to be miserable. But if we stop and talk and listen to each other and try to understand where we're coming from, man, we might just take a step forward and keep going backwards.
Yeah, I often say, the country went to hell when we stopped letting 5-year-old boys beat each other up in the schoolyard. because then you kind of learned how to deal with problems, and you kind of figured out that you figured it out in the sandbox. We stopped doing that, and now we got people who are 40, 50 years old who can't deal with that kind of
when I first started going to Washington D.C. in 2003 and 4, there were log cabin Republicans and blue dog Democrats, and while they disagreed with each other, they had a conversation like we are right now. Now, I've seen Washington over the last 17, 18 years evolve into there's no conversation. It's all argument, all theatrics. Go on, your favorite news channel and bash the other side. That is not leadership. The American people deserve better.
Yeah.
And my God, the American people need to hold their elected officials' feet to the fire. It's really simple. Once you change your mindset to they're not rock stars and they're civil servants, you will get something done. Listen, my IQ hovers around room temperature at best, but I've been able to help pass 13 pieces of legislation for a total of about $40 billion that's helped hundreds of thousands of people. Then anybody can do it.
And good on you. And let's talk about the work that you do. You're the founder, president, chairman, basically the chief cook and bottle washer there at the FealGood Foundation. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, Rick, when we first started, we were supposed to be a Band-Aid on a machine gun wound. Pay utilities, put food on the table. But I got asked to go to D.C. Somebody said I was good at what I did. I never had any training. And we've helped pass 5 bills in D.C., 5 in Albany, 2 in New Jersey, and 1 in Michigan now. But, we've also donated $9 million. I donated a kidney to a complete stranger. Listen, I didn't need 9/11 to know right from wrong. I needed 9/11 to show everybody how my mother raised me. And I think she'd be proud. She might hit me in the back of the head for cursing once in a while, but I think she'd be happy.
No, look. I put you in that hero category.
I'm
one of
no
those working class heroes who selflessly moves forward and helps others. And I know we throw that word around a lot and too easily, but I put you in that category because a lot of people would have just fallen back into the shadows.
Yeah, I was taught at an early. I was that 5-year-old kid in the sandbox. All right, so I had about 80 fights going through middle school and high school. I was a born fighter, but I'm also a pacifist. And I also believe you can get things done. Thinking that you're capable of violence and you'll fight anybody is sometimes just good enough to get something done.
Yeah. No, and look, the reason I bring this up, and I have a bunch of people going, oh, you want 5-year-olds to beat each other up? I go, no, I want 5-year-olds to beat each other up so they know that it hurts and that they know that this isn't always the way and that they figure out that, down the road that we can have these conversations.
Well, you're not a weak man if you're full of humanity and you're full of empathy and you're full of caring and being generous. You're a weak man when you never had that fight. When you're a weak man when you never felt the pain. You got to feel pain. Nobody's immune from getting pooped on in life. And right, I mean, we're all going to go through something. Some of us are still going through something. And you're no lesser of that person if you give of yourself. Too many people have these false egos, and but inside, and I see it all the time on these when we're fighting for legislation. And Jon Stewart and I were on the Hill yesterday in D.C. and a lot of these people act with bravado, but yet they're scared and they're tiny little minute individuals and insignificant in life, but they use their titles as congressmen or senators to blow themselves up, and they put their pants on the same way me and you did, Rick, this morning.
No, I say, look, they're like you said, they're not rock stars. I call them tools. Everything that's going on in this society is not their fault. It's our fault. We're the ones who put them there. We can fix all of this by taking them out because they're simply tools. They're our representatives. This is still a constitutionally limited democratic republic with representatives, not kings and queens and knights. They're our people. And if they're not doing what we need them to do, we need to get them out. Now, here's the problem. We both know there's a ton of money into this that's promoting this kind of gridlock because, as I said at the beginning, our 745 USDA certified billionaires, they walked away with $2.1 trillion during this pandemic. That's what's going on.
My dad, in 1980, I'm going to age myself. I was 14 years old in 1980. And my father had a really good job. and he made $80,000 a year. But my dad had 5 kids. I'm the youngest. And he put kids through college, kept the roof up, and a nice house on Long Island. And now $80,000, you know, his boss probably made about $150,000. He was the CEO. The disparity now to back in 1980 is, you know, you're making 80,000 and the CEO is making 22 billion a year. There's a problem there.
Yep.
You know, during the pandemic, these people got richer and we got poorer. You know, not all people are dumb. Some people pay attention.
And like I said, you know, now, but going back to 1980, and we're about the same age. Going back to 1980, you had a union density of about 27, 28%. We're down to 6.4% now in the private sector, which is why I'm thrilled to see all of this strike activity, and also people leaving jobs that are crummy going on. I think we're seeing a moment of a potential growth and boom in the labor movement.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to come back. I think it's going to be slower than we all anticipated. But again, we were a large machine that was shut down. And to get that thing back up and running again, it's going to take labor. More than any other profession, it's going to take labor. And I think by getting the infrastructure bill passed, and I think by doing other things in D.C. and at state capitals, labor will come back and the unions will be strong again.
That is my hope. So last question I've got for you. You know, you're seeing all this strike activity going on. You know, I'm hoping that this is a flashpoint that helps a massive expansion, but it comes down to legislation. Do you have any hope that we get this Build Back Better plan pushed through with people like Manchin and Sinema?
Yeah, I do. I really do. You know, Nancy Pelosi gave me an hour meeting yesterday. If we were in a crisis, the Speaker of the House would not have given John Feal an hour meeting yesterday. So, yeah, I'm confident. I can gauge the temperature of Washington, D.C. And, you know, even Mitch McConnell, who I've had several meetings with, a lot of this is going to be a reflection. You know, they got to answer to their constituents, not only the American people. Yeah. And politics is personal back home. And I think at the end of the day, in the 11th hour, they're going to get a lot of this stuff done and ironed out.
I sure hope you're right, John. John, I appreciate the time. Really great talking to you. Great meeting. I appreciate you coming on, sharing some thoughts. Good stuff.
Humble, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John Feal. Make sure you check out his website, FealGoodFoundation.com. We'll get links out on social media, how you can do that. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that the bank robber known as Pretty Boy Floyd was gunned down by federal agents in Ohio. He was born Charles Arthur Floyd in 1904 in Georgia. His family moved to Oklahoma when he was a boy. Like many Oklahomans during this era, he fell on hard economic times. Floyd turned to crime. He did a 4-year stretch in a Missouri prison for payroll robbery. When he got out, he tried to get a job in the Oklahoma oil fields. Unable to find work, Floyd took up bank robbing. He robbed banks in Kentucky, Ohio, and Missouri. He got caught and convicted in Ohio, but escaped on his train trip to prison. He made his way back to Oklahoma. There he became a folk hero. Locals called him the Robin Hood of the Cookson Hills. Legend had it that Floyd destroyed mortgage papers when he robbed banks, winning him friends among farmers reeling from the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. Floyd became a national fugitive when he was accused of killing federal agents in Kansas City. He denied he was ever involved in the killings. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the U.S. Bureau of Investigation, named Floyd public enemy number 1. Finally, the law caught up with Floyd in an Ohio cornfield. His body was returned to Oklahoma, where as many as 40,000 came to his funeral. Woody Guthrie remembered Floyd in song.
But a many a starving farmer, the same old story told, how the outlaw paid their mortgage and saved their little home.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Others tell you about a stranger that come to beg a meal. Underneath his napkin left $1,000 bill.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So President Biden tweeted out today, quote, "I've said it before. When I think climate, I think jobs." He said we can meet the moment on climate change and create good-paying union jobs with my plans. And for me, the important part of this is the union jobs part. Yeah, we can create a bunch of crummy, low-paying wage jobs, but we can create really good wage jobs. We can choose to make other choices. We can choose to help families get by. We can choose to make this transition something better. Thus, the Build Back Better. Although sadly, with Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, we're talking about building back maybe a little bit less. I'm here to share some thoughts on how the clean energy economy can help create those jobs and also lower your costs at home. I've asked Trevor Higgins to come talk with us. Trevor is the Senior Director of Domestic Climate and Energy Policy there at the Center for American Progress, americanprogress.org, their website. Trevor, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So President Biden says, look, when he thinks climate, thinks jobs. I think the exact same thing, which is why, during the last election, Jay Inslee was such an influence, I think, on me anyway. And when he was talking about, look, we need to do this because it's the right thing, but we can also create a good economy out of this.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not going to happen by accident. I mean, there is a lot of work to do. We have to more than double the pace of renewable energy construction. We have to build electric vehicles and new manufacturing capacity, new battery plants. But it's not going to be a good job unless we put the right strings on it. And that's one of the things that's most exciting, I think, about the core energy provisions that are in the Build Back Better Act that have survived the Manchin cut so far. They include real incentives to require unionization. So if you're building an electric vehicle, you get another $4,500 if it was built at a union plant on top of the rest of the credit. For new wind and solar plants, for the first time ever, those tax and credit incentives you're going to have prevailing wage requirements. And eventually it phases in, you're going to need to have domestic steel and iron and other components in order to get the full value of the credit. That's a pretty powerful incentive. And I think it's going to change decisions about where and how industry invests in the workforce today.
Which is why you're seeing, the battery plants, all of the auto companies have been, saying, hey, we're going to build these giant, battery plants here in the U.S. They've had their big announcement. Ford's going to build 3 of them. I guess Jeep, the people who own Jeep, they're talking about building some. There could be a glut of manufacturing and batteries of the future. And I think that's a great thing because we do need to reshore our manufacturing capacity. We do need to start making things in this country again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you saw with solar panels how a lot of the original manufacturing and design and invention of these panels happened here in the United States, but the manufacturing today is in China because we didn't do what we need to do to compete on the global stage. And it's obvious when you look down the road 10 years from now where these new technologies are that we have to fight for that manufacturing capacity. And it's batteries, it's heat pumps for homes, and it's electric vehicles. We know what's coming. Let's invest now to build the manufacturing capacity we need.
Yeah, it's about smart policy, smart investment. It doesn't get any simpler than that. But as a kid growing up in the 70s, I go back to Jimmy Carter putting solar panels on the White House, and I go back to that moment and I go, there is such a lost opportunity right there. And then symbolically, Reagan comes to office and the first official act that he does is to rip those solar panels off and put them into storage. I guess, I look at that moment where we as voters chose, the wrong path again.
Yeah, it's funny. I think those are little symbols actually add up to a lot. And it's funny to think about what could have been different. I think we're facing a similar choice right now. The scope of this Build Back Better agenda could really be historic. And it feels like they might be close to an agreement, but we don't have it yet. And the difference between having these investments in place and not is enormous. Yeah. It's going to make a difference for jobs. It's going to make a difference for climate. It's going to make a difference for energy costs too.
So let's talk about that because, obviously your piece is on how clean energy is going to lower, household energy costs. How's that going to work? I mean, is everybody going to be their own independent is this the vision that we're going to all be off the grid? We're going to be all creating all of our own power. How do you see this playing out?
Sure, you know, some people might do that, but I think actually most people will find that they don't have to take any action at all, and these changes are going to happen in the energy system around them, and it's just going to lower costs. You know, a lot of the discussion right now is about how fossil fuel prices are getting high, and that's translating into higher energy costs because 3/4 of all the cost of energy right now comes just from buying the fuel, and the other quarter is from everything else, the power plants, the grid. And
so the speculators basically drive the price up too as well.
yeah, well, and the fossil fuels are being hit hard by climate change, which is ironic. You know, when Hurricane Ida came at the end of August, it shut down 90% of the oil and gas production in the Gulf of Mexico. And that led EIA to raise their forecasts for the rest of the year for how much fossil fuel is going to cost. And right before that, over the summer, there was all this extreme heat across the whole country. That meant that more natural gas was used to run air conditioners that normally was being put into storage to be available for wintertime use. Now we're running into winter with lower than average inventories for the natural gas storage, meaning that we're going to be exposed to whatever price fluctuations happen.
Right.
Before that, in February, Texas was hit by that Arctic storm. And I think the governor ran out right away to blame wind. But more than half of the power that went out was because of natural gas. Either the natural gas plants froze or the natural gas production froze. Natural gas production was cut in half in Texas as a result of that. And it's not that any one fuel is reliable or unreliable, it's that this system has to work.
Right.
And it turns out that fossil fuels are getting battered by climate change. And it's not the only reason they're expensive right now. You know, OPEC is involved also. But it's translating into higher cost for consumers. And I think it's a really good reason to invest in clean energy, which is more affordable.
Yeah, no, one of the reasons we put solar panels on our house is, one, there was some good tax incentives at the time, both in the federal government level and on the state level, and it made it, you know, reasonably affordable at the time. And two, you know, I want to be as energy independent as I can possibly be because of those things. As you point out, you know, you're going to have these crises, you're going to have these fluctuations, and prices are going to go up, or, you know, look, you're going to get cut off. So for me, at some point, creating a system that has a wide array of opportunities to not get cut off is something I think is important.
Definitely. I mean, if you are lucky enough to have an electric vehicle right now, your cost to operate that car is half as much per mile as an average gasoline-powered vehicle. There's less maintenance, there's less fuel cost. And if you can power that with a solar panel on your house, then your electricity prices are low also, and it can work even if your power gets shut off because of a hurricane or whatever other reason. So it for the people who have that, it makes their lives easier, they're more resilient, it's more affordable. The trick is it's expensive at the outset, and that's the brilliance of these investments in the Build Back Better Act. The federal government's going to be able to provide everybody with tax credits. Even if you don't have tax liability, they'll make these credits refundable.
Yeah, to be honest,
it's essentially like a grant.
It's the reason we put it was one of the main reasons we put the panels on our house. Because to be honest, the price tag, what he showed to me, the sticker shock was like, whoa, that's going to be like the rest of my lifetime to pay that off. He said, no, you get this, and it made it much more affordable. And this is where I think you have to have that initial boost of investment, because you got people going, but Trevor, you know, you're harming the gas industry by giving these subsidies to starting up this other thing. Didn't we do kind of the same thing to the gas industry years ago? I mean, wasn't that kind of the thing that got them started?
That's right. I mean, we've had 100 years of subsidies for the gas industry. In fact, it was I think at the moment that the automobile was taking shape, there were discussions of whether they should try and invest in batteries or they should switch to gasoline, and that's right around the time they started passing subsidies for the oil industry. So these choices make a difference, and they last for a long time. You know, what's one thing that's interesting? So there's this new study from the Rhodium Group, which is they do energy modeling, and they were looking at these energy cost questions. They found that, yeah, there's going to be less demand for oil, for gasoline, as a result of people switching to electric vehicles and such. But it doesn't affect employment because the oil industry is in a global market. And so it's the global prices that drive that, not the domestic demand. So they didn't find any impacts on the oil industry prices. Therefore, it leads me to believe same for jobs. But one thing that was really interesting, so they found that when you look at this, obviously the households that switch to electricity like we were talking about, and there'll be more of them because of these investments, they win big. But even the households that still use fossil fuels, which will be plenty of households still have a natural gas furnace or whatever else, they benefit also because natural gas prices will go down. By just shaving off a little bit of the demand across the economy for these natural gas prices, you don't have such a pinch. So that when you hit these moments in the winter or in the summer at the peak demand, you've just lessened the demand for these things because more people are able to use other sources of energy instead. Even people who haven't switched save money also.
Yeah.
That's why they found that the average household saves $500 a year onto these investments.
Wow. Now I look at Joe Manchin, who he seems to be against the idea of addressing climate change because it's going to affect coal. Does coal have a future in this country? I mean, I have friends in West Virginia who they're hell bent on we got to save coal because there are 11,000 coal miner jobs still left in West Virginia. Is coal part of this future?
I think that the natural gas industry is the thing that really switched the situation for coal. And coal has been in the decline we primarily use it for electricity, right? There's some industrial uses too, where it may continue for a while. But in the power sector, it's losing out to natural gas because natural gas prices are cheaper. And you can put kind of new technology to try and capture the emissions. You can try and make the coal plant work. It's very expensive, and it's just typically not as affordable to do it that way as to put that same technology on a natural gas plant or just build wind and solar. So I think that the role of coal is kind of, the fate was already sealed by the changes that came in the market a while ago, and it's going to take some time.
But I've been told quite candidly it was Obama. Obama did all this. It's all Obama's fault.
Sure, it was the war on coal, right? Yeah, but I think that the decline started before that, and it really was driven by these factors that are kind of outside of any policy. I mean, the thing that was people pointed to most under Obama never even took effect, right? Which was the Clean Power Plan, and yet still coal's in the same spot. So I think that shows this is broader market forces at effect.
Yeah, and ultimately, when we start talking about, hey, we can save money, do you think this is going to be the enticing thing? Because for me, it was one, I want to help save the planet. I want to be the good steward of our environment. But ultimately, it came down to dollars and cents. It came down to, can I do this while doing the feel-good stuff? Because I want to, I want to set a good example for the kids. But also, I want to help save the planet. But ultimately, it came down to money.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and it does for these businesses too, which is why I think it's important to put out the incentives in front of them so that they make the investments that are needed to catch up to where these technologies are going. There's no reason why we couldn't have new battery production facilities locating in West Virginia, right? New car manufacturing facilities located here in the United States instead of in China where they're trying to build the batteries. Like there are ways to make these jobs keep up with the transition that's coming, and all it takes is some far-sighted investment.
No, and does the Build Back Better plan do enough of this? I know it's never going to be enough, but are you satisfied by what you see in this? Do you think this is going to help?
I think it's definitely going to help. We're going to see how big it is. I mean, that's largely up to Manchin. I think the bigger it is, the more help it provides. There are investments in new manufacturing facilities, for refurbishing old manufacturing facilities, for production of batteries, solar panels, wind turbines. There is money in there that anyone who wants to build one of those projects, they can only get the full value of the credit, like I mentioned before, if they're employing people with they're paying good wages for the people they employ. And in the case of cars, they actually have to even be unionized. These are really monumental changes in the way that the federal government does its budgeting policies. And it's going to have a huge effect. I mean, when you look back at the Recovery Act, which was a tiny fraction of what we're talking about, even after the top line number on the Build Back Better comes down, it's still much larger than the Stimulus Act was. That American Recovery Act, it had $90 billion investments in wind and solar, and it caused wind and solar to take off exponentially. And a lot of that's attributable to the investments that were made then. And just think how much more we can drive this forward now with investments that have the right strings attached to them for good high quality domestic jobs.
Yeah, I come back to the idea that capitalism seems to always decide. You know, the mask thing, the vaccine thing. Capitalism seems to be the one, because governmentally we seem to not be able to get out of our way. But when I see Ford and I see all of the auto companies investing in this being their future, when I see them going, half our production within a few years is going to be electric vehicles, this is the future, isn't it?
No, I think that's right. And I think that they see the writing on the wall there, and they're going to start competing for what could be a really good thing for our wallets, for our health, for the climate.
The last line of questioning I've got for you, because I've said from the beginning that I fear that we get nothing out of all of this, that the bickering happens, that the Joe Manchins of the world get all angry, and we end up just gridlocking and nothing gets done. Or if it does, it's going to happen down the road where politically it's not going to be helpful. But I fear we get nothing done. What does our future look like in the event nothing gets done and we have more gridlock in the next year?
Yeah, right. Well, I agree with you that I think the biggest obstacle right now is not what's in the package, but whether the package gets done. Because the scope of what they're talking about is really important. If on the climate front, which is the thing that I focus on day to day, if we have this package, we could put cutting emissions in half, to half of peak levels by the end of this decade in reach. If we don't, emissions are going to stagnate at their current level. And that means we're not competing for the electric vehicles market. We don't have the incentive for new manufacturing facilities to be built in the United States. We don't have the incentive for the renewables companies to employ unionized labor. We lose all of those pieces, and we're left sort of just kind of bouncing along the same pollution level, causing the same harm to our kids, failing to grab the opportunity while other countries do. And by the time we get our heads straight again and try it again, we'll be like in the same situation we're in right now with solar panels, where we're trying to claw back something. So we're trying to claw back the manufacturing. We don't have to do that. We can start right now, and we can compete in the global economy for clean energy.
No, I'm right there with you. Just a little visionary leadership on both sides of the political aisle. I mean, this should not be political. But again, I guess to me it shows just how much lobby money and political influence has on our political system. But Trevor, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing some thoughts on how we can save a little bit of money and save the planet as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Great to talk with you, Ray.
Good stuff. Trevor Higgins. He is the Senior Director there of Energy there at the Center for American Progress. Check out their website, americanprogress.org. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have a great weekend.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that the bank robber known as Pretty Boy Floyd was gunned down by federal agents in Ohio. He was born Charles Arthur Floyd in 1904 in Georgia. His family moved to Oklahoma when he was a boy. Like many Oklahomans during this era, he fell on hard economic times. Floyd turned to crime. He did a 4-year stretch in a Missouri prison for payroll robbery. When he got out, he tried to get a job in the Oklahoma oil fields. Unable to find work, Floyd took up bank robbing. He robbed banks in Kentucky, Ohio, and Missouri. He got caught and convicted in Ohio, but escaped on his train trip to prison. He made his way back to Oklahoma. There he became a folk hero. Locals called him the Robin Hood of the Cookson Hills. Legend had it that Floyd destroyed mortgage papers when he robbed banks, winning him friends among farmers reeling from the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. Floyd became a national fugitive when he was accused of killing federal agents in Kansas City. He denied he was ever involved in the killings. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the U.S. Bureau of Investigation, named Floyd public enemy number 1. Finally, the law caught up with Floyd in an Ohio cornfield. His body was returned to Oklahoma, where as many as 40,000 came to his funeral. Woody Guthrie remembered Floyd in song.
But a many a star starving farmer, the same old story told. How the outlaw paid their mortgage and saved their little home.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Others tell you about a stranger that come to beg a meal. Underneath his napkin left $1,000 bill.
Question: what does a packet of M&Ms and your local veterinarian have in common? Answer: both are owned by Mars, Inc., the global candy monopolist. Since the 1980s, we've seen massive consolidations in industry after industry, from airlines to newspapers, the internet to candy. These monopolists run roughshod over consumers, workers, communities, suppliers, and our nation's commitment to the common good. And now the corporate attitude seems to be, what the hell, why not let monopolization go to the dogs? This change has been led by private equity groups. They are corporate takeover sharks that borrow billions of dollars to buy out, plunder, then sell off the remnants of established businesses. They target enterprises that can be grabbed on the cheap but have assets like a loyal customer base. Then the sharks raise prices on those customers while cutting staff and quality of service. This has been happening to thousands of local vet practices and hospitals, which have quietly been plucked by Wall Street entities bearing nondescript acronyms like IVC, JAB, KKR, and VCA. At first, locals don't notice the takeover because the corporate outfit not only buys your friendly Dr. Barry Bones vet service, but they also buy the doc's name. As an IVC takeover consultant confided, people like to take their dogs to local vets and not feel like it's a corporate machine. But increasingly, it is. Solo practitioners now must answer to bean counters at headquarters, such as VCA, Veterinary Center of America, which has 1,000 vet practices across the country and is now owned by Mars, Inc. This is Jim Hightower saying one feisty group battling monopolizers is the National Veterinary Professionals Union. Get info at natvup.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Our special weekly panel edition of the Rick Smith Show. Lots on the horizon. This week was really kind of crazy. We saw a lot of stuff about Joe Manchin, our former president being, well, as presidential as ever, and also lots of worker activism going on as more than 100,000 people are either on strike, marching a picket line, or getting ready to do just that. So lots and lots to get to. Before we get started into all of that, I got to introduce our all-star panel. Our good friend Rich Ojeda from No Dems Left Behind. Also, Sarah Burris, reporter over at RawStory, and Laura Packard, cancer survivor and executive director of the Healthcare Voter Group. Guys, thanks so much for taking time for us.
Airborne.
You bet.
So let's start with Joe Manchin. Joe freaking Manchin. Here's the thing. I got it when it was about, we can't possibly afford the price tag. I got it there. I got it when, it's so much money. We can't possibly do it because it's too much money. It seems like the message is now changed from it's about the money to it's about ideology. It's about saving coal, and it's about protecting the nation, well, from those lazy slackers who just don't want to work. Rich, I want to start with you. From being from West Virginia, is this classic Joe Manchin rhetoric? Is this what you expect from Joe?
Well, first off, anytime we talk about we can't afford it, I mean, look at our military budget. We can afford anything. We could do a lot for our people. That's a fact. Joe Manchin is protecting Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin's trying to act like he's trying to take care of the 11,400 coal miners in West Virginia. But at the end of the day, this is Joe Manchin protecting the dividends that he gets every single year to the tune of about $1.1 million from his son's energy companies that he has. That's what this is about. Joe is about the money, and Joe's about the power. So, you know, I don't know. I don't think that he's going to actually switch, because if he does, then what does that mean for the Democratic Party in West Virginia? Because the Democratic Party in West Virginia, most of the people that are in the that work in the Democratic Party are kin to Joe Manchin. The Democratic Party has only had one mission in its entire existence, and that is to make sure Joe Manchin always wins. So, you know, Joe Manchin can go down this path, but I will tell you that he's walking a fine line with his legacy. And if he wants his legacy to be that of a traitor and somebody who absolutely sold his people out, that desperately need things, understand that we're 50th out of 50 in terms of infrastructure. We don't have broadband in the majority of this state, especially southern West Virginia. Kids are not even getting homework anymore because the teachers don't want them to go home and realize they have no connectivity. Most kids in West Virginia, to do their homework, have to sit in the McDonald's parking lot in order to get Wi-Fi to do their homework. And that's West Virginia. And we can do so much. And we have a person in Washington, D.C. that is supposed to be the leader of the Democratic Party. And he is absolutely showing his true colors, that he's about money. He's about what benefits him. Joe is about Joe.
No, I don't disagree with that.
The last part of that, I was going to talk about the 11,000, nearly 12,000, 1% of the population that works in coal mining. And like, there's a real opportunity to change the face of West Virginia, to completely change the economy, to change the way that people are going to get like free training and stuff. All of these people who've lost their jobs over the years could get free community college, get all kinds of free training, and finally have jobs that are for a new era. And it's the kind of jobs that will go on well past Joe Manchin's life. And I mean, regardless of legacy here, he could save the state. Like, he really has the power at like one individual to save an entire state, and he doesn't care.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, you brought up legacy, and that's the important part of this, Laura. You know, when you're looking at a legacy that he doesn't seem to care about, because I look at Robert Byrd. I have friends who live in West Virginia, and you've got the CIA center there, the Department of Transportation stuff. He brought home the bacon. He understood what bringing stuff home to make people's lives better. Manchin doesn't seem to be getting this. And again, I go back to what Rich said. It seems like he's just trying to line his own pockets, and I hate believing that. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, as Sarah and Richard said, West Virginia is one of the poorest states in the country. This is Joe Manchin's opportunity to be a hero, to do concrete things to help thousands of West Virginians. And so he faces a choice. Does he help out his rich donors, or does he help out the people of West Virginia? Yeah. And he was elected to help the people of West Virginia. So now he needs to do it.
Do you buy his slippery slope argument, this idea that we're just creating more entitlements and more of a welfare state? Does anybody buy that as his defense?
Absolute garbage. First and foremost, there's nothing in West Virginia that's an entitlement. We're asking for 2 years of community college, because the majority of people around here, college is something that it's not in the works. If you are poor and you can't afford to go to college, then you have dig coal or sell dope or join the military. That's what West Virginia offers you. And giving people the ability to get 2 years worth of community college could elevate them out of poverty. It's done all over the world. It's amazing what we will not get. It's amazing what we will not get from our government, and we absolutely desperately need it. I can show you places in West Virginia where instead of the 2-lane road on the side of the mountain, one of those lanes has fallen off the side of the mountain, and buses still travel that every single day. We need this desperately, and Joe Manchin is the one that's going to stop us from being able to get these capabilities.
No, and to that point, the fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but West Virginia is a state that already has a very high population of people who are getting welfare and government assistance. To me, it seems like it's a welfare state already. Joe Manchin, by supporting this Build Back Better plan, could actually bring resources in to change that. Or am I missing some point here? Let me start with you, Laura. Am I missing something here?
It sounds like excuses to me because, as you pointed out, West Virginia already is receiving more money than it puts in. You know, West Virginia is already benefiting from the largesse of other states, and this bill would help West Virginia even more. So is Joe Manchin concerned about New York taxpayers? Does he want to save New York some money and give West Virginians a bum deal?
Yeah, it's crazy. But, you know, Sarah, here's the thing. This week we saw the story come out that Manchin met with Bernie Sanders. Heated discussion behind closed door where, quoted reportedly, Manchin said, well, how about zero? Which means that he wants you to believe he's going to tank the whole thing, and we end up getting nothing done.
If that's the way Joe Manchin wants to do this, then I'm pretty sure he's going to end up being the villain of the entire United States, because we're not just talking about West Virginia. We're talking about the 50 United States and all of the territories being able to have, you know, not just paid family leave and child care, but, you know, education and roads and bridges. And so this is all sort of connected to this this bill that Joe Manchin has just decided that he's going to be like, all right, I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's not the way government works. And I mean, if Joe Manchin wants to go that route, then I concede Bernie Sanders being like, you know what, I'm going to go out to West Virginia and do a little rally and talk to the people that are there and explain to them what Joe Manchin said in that meeting, and explain that, you know, he's abandoning them, and, you know, hell, let's put some signs out that say "Help me, Joe" or something like that all over the state. I don't know, just something that could help this guy get it in his stupid head that this is serious. And you know, yes, it's important for West Virginia, but it's the entire country too.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been in that room. I know Bernie Sanders. I've interviewed him a number of times on this program, and I would love to see him worked up. I would love to have seen that. I would love to have been a fly on that wall. Wouldn't you have, Laura?
Mm-hmm. And I think that we need to keep pushing. I mean, right now it's all talk with Manchin and Sinema and everybody. The voting hasn't happened yet, so right now is the talking. But when it comes to the voting, they need to do the right thing and vote for what the American people want and need, and that is Build Back Better.
Yeah. Now this week you had President Biden in Scranton, Pennsylvania, going back home to the Trolley Museum there, and giving his spiel of what I've been calling the Build Back, I guess, a little bit better, because we've come off the 3.5. We started off at $6 trillion. They compromised down to $3.5 trillion. Now we're somewhere in the maybe $2 trillion. Do you see it? Do you see it coming down any further? Let's start with you, Rich.
You know, I hope not. You know, but I think right now it's more leaning like 1.75. You know, we need these. And once again, you know, going back to the Manchin piece, West Virginia is desperate for these capabilities. So he can either do the right thing and be a hero, and I hope that he does, or he can do the wrong thing and he can spend the rest of his life living and loving his money, but he can't walk out his front door because everybody's going to be screaming, you know, that he's an absolute sack of you-know-what. So if that's what he wants, if that's what he wants his legacy to be, by all means, go for it. Because at the end of the day, I'm done with him. I'm done with him.
Yeah, but I look at this, and again, they pulled the free college option out, which I think absolutely has to be in there. The community college part. What I've been saying for the longest time is, you know, there was a time in our country's history where an 8th grade education was enough. And at some point they said, no, we need to get an additional 4 years. We need to get high school. We need to get that in. I'm saying now we need to get community college in, or a vocational program. Learn how to be a welder or a pipe fitter or an electrician or anything, but that additional 2 years of education, I think in this moment is something we need desperately.
You're spot on. But here's another thing too that people aren't thinking about, and I hope they start. You know, Joe Biden has elevated 40% of children out of poverty in this country with that $250 to $300 check every month that goes to these parents. Oh, by the way, Kentucky and West Virginia are getting a lot of that. And now what they've decided is we want it stopped at 1 year. So basically at the end of the year, we're going to let everybody go back to poverty the way that they were. Our government should be out there working to do everything in their power to elevate children out of poverty. And that's the path that they're going to go. And that's what they're fighting. That's what they want to get rid of. You know, that's why it's important for us to let people know, would you like to go to college? Would you like to? Because guess what? You're not going to get to now because of these Republicans. And if Joe Manchin jumps on board with them, because of him too.
Yeah, Sarah,
The
your
idea
thoughts?
that this law can pass at 1-7 is never going to happen. The Progressive Caucus in the House has basically said we're not going lower than 2.2. I think it was Diane Hall who was just like, yeah, no, that's not acceptable. She didn't say what number, but I think if given the fact that Democrats have come down from 6 million to 3.5, if Manchin says 1.7, I think Democrats should say, okay, how about 3.45, and just incrementally go down from there, because this is just complete BS at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they're all facing choices. All these elected officials face a choice right now. Do you care more about the children of hardworking Americans that you represent, or do you care more about the children of hedge fund billionaires and preserving their tax breaks?
Yeah, they don't care about anybody's children. They care about the next political cycle. And I look at someone like Manchin, who, as Rich pointed out, is completely safe no matter what he does. Even if he were to switch parties, I still think he's completely safe. So let's go there. Do you think the threat of he's got an exit plan, he's going to leave the Democratic Party, do you think that's a real threat? Let's start with you, Laura.
I would defer to our West Virginian for more West Virginian insight, but it seems like he's all over the place. That there's the story that came out in Mother Jones, and the reporters are standing by that story. And then Manchin himself came out and said, no, he never threatened to walk away from the Democratic Party. It sounds like there's something there. I don't know if the truth may lie somewhere in between the two, but it sounds like he's at least made some comments or threats that could be taken that way.
Now, Sarah, I mean, you're obviously in D.C., you're in touch with stuff. You got to know Mitch McConnell is behind this. I mean, at least my view is Mitch McConnell is whining and dining and promising whatever he can get. This is where all this is coming from. The evil mastermind on the right, I think, is behind all of this.
I don't think that even Mitch McConnell needs to be. I think it's very, very clear that lobbyists and big money are already buying Joe Manchin and Sinema too. And so I don't know that McConnell even has to come, meet with Manchin and be like, oh, I don't know, Joe might have to. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk like a turtle, but sort of what Mitch McConnell sounds like in my head. But I don't know if McConnell's making some side deal with him. I think it'd be interesting to have some famous Republican come out and say, what, if Manchin switched parties, have some Republican come out and say, what, I'm switching parties to a Democrat and I'm going to run against him.
Yeah, there are none of those left.
Yeah, because at the very least, you have Manchin is not a friend of Donald Trump. And so it's not like, even as a Democrat, or if you change parties to a Republican, it's not like Trump's going to show up and be like, oh, vote for Joe Manchin. What's that going to look like?
Yeah, good point.
No, you got to understand, Joe Manchin polls everything. Joe Manchin will do a poll on whether to drink Coke or Pepsi, and if 51% says Pepsi, he's going to have a Pepsi can. He's polling everything. Joe Manchin is planning on coming to West Virginia and running for governor in 2024, and he has watched our state go from being a Democratic state to now being a Republican-led state to now being a state that supports Donald Trump. Even most of the Democrats do. And I'm telling you right now, that is what he's doing. Joe Manchin is a politician. And he's going to play them games.
But isn't this one of those moments where you go, if you were to bring home the bacon and you were to make people's lives better and they were able to see that you would go, hey, thank you, Joe. And the entire country would be like, thank you, Joe. It just seems there's something more
these people have been brought up to believe that anything that is given, except what they normally get, like welfare and things like that, it's socialism and it's wrong, and they'll fight it tooth and nail.
No, it's scary. But ultimately, the person that we didn't talk about hardly at all is the other wild card in this, and that's Kirsten Sinema. And, you know, she could blow this up down the road, even if Manchin does come along. So there's a long way before we get any of this stuff done. Guys, I got to take a quick break right here. Appreciate the thoughts. On the other side, going to talk a little bit about Striketober. Lots of people out in the streets. Lots of people ready to, well, fight for those better wages, hours, and conditions that we've always talking about. Going to take a quick break. Right back with our all-star panel of Rich Ojeda from No Duns Left Behind, Sarah Burris from RawStory, and Laura Packard from the Education Voter Group. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Stop the talk.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives them voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day mill workers began to walk off the job at the Phoenix and Gilbert knitting mills in Little Falls, New York. The strike was sandwiched between the Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and the 1913 Patterson textile strike. American, Hungarian, Polish, and Italian workers, over 70% of them women, struck against wage reductions. Their hours had just been cut from 60 hours a week to 54, and their wages adjusted accordingly. A recent Factory Inspection Commission investigation revealed deplorable working and living conditions, among the worst in the state. As a result, state legislators passed protective legislation restricting women's work hours. Many social reformers pushed for laws like these in the hopes of improving women's quality of life by minimizing their exploitation on the job. But the reduction in hours spelled disaster for these mill women, who then faced a loss of income that ranged between 75 cents and $2 a week. Socialists in nearby Schenectady, including the socialist mayor George Lunn, arrived in town and were promptly arrested for giving open-air speeches in support of the strikers. IWW organizers soon followed to help organize picketing, daily strike parades, and strike committees for each of the factories. They quickly established IWW Local 801, the National Industrial Union of Textile Workers. By the end of the month, mounted police closed in on the women strikers and began clubbing them, many into unconsciousness. The police raided strike headquarters and arrested IWW strike committee leaders. But the women strikers stood strong and were celebrating victory by the end of the year. They won full reinstatement and 60 hours pay for 54 hours work.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, October has been renamed to Striketober. As look, you're seeing a lot of union activity, a lot of union workers out on the picket line. And as I've said, it's about damn time. It's about time we see this wave of people saying, I'm not going to take it anymore, not going to work in horrible conditions, not going to work for poverty wages, want better health care, want better retirement security. And moreover, one of the main themes going across all of these strikes, I want more family time. I don't want to work 12, 14, 16, 18-hour days, 6-7 days a week. I want a better life-work balance. That being right at the top of it. Like I said, there's more than 100,000 people who are either on a picket line today or getting ready to get on a picket line. And understand, organized labor in this country is only about 6% of the workforce. That means that small percentage is sending a lot of people out on the picket line. So what are the people who don't have union protections doing? They're just leaving, or they're leaving the workplace entirely. And here to share some thoughts on what Striketober has brought us thus far, I've got our all-star panel of Rich Ojeda from No Dems Left Behind, Sarah Burris from RawStory, and of course Laura Packard from Education Vote, healthcarevoter.com, where she's the executive. I'm going to get it, the executive director. Guys, thanks for sticking around for me. So let's start with you, Sarah. You're the person who I know has a huge labor background. Thoughts on Striketober?
Yes, I'm so excited. First of all, this is the best possible time for this to happen because companies are desperate for voters. I mean, not for voters, for workers. Everybody's coming back from the lockdowns and everything, and a lot of folks who had low-paying, crappy jobs are now able to get hired for, decent wages and for better-paying jobs, better benefits, all of the above. And so, these companies that are so desperate to find people, they have a choice either, basically lose their workforce or pay just a tiny bit more, or maybe make people wear masks, or all of the things that would protect people in their workplace. And so it's exciting. There were two stories this week that I got excited about as well. There was a story about a guy who heard a bunch of companies complaining about how they can't get people to apply for their jobs. And so he applied for 60 of those companies and only one called him for an interview. So basically that sort of calls all of these companies onto the carpet about, people just don't want to work. And it's a complete lie. And the other story is there are all of these people who are brilliant coders and bartenders and like people who have real skill that are necessary. And so a friend of mine tweeted out a couple of text message exchanges for people who just quit their jobs because they were like, yeah, no, I'm not going to get treated like this. I can go down the street and work for, better wages and better treatment, for somebody else. And so I just feel like we have reached this era of empowerment for people in the workforce, and it's so exciting. I get super excited about it.
No, and I'm right there with you because for me, I'm looking at the number of strikes, and like as I pointed out, only about 6% of the private sector workforce are in labor unions. So to see this many people saying, no, we're going to fight for better contracts, we demand better wages, hours, conditions, better family time, health care, retirement security, all of those things which have been eviscerated over the last 45 years. That's great. But also what they're calling the Great Resignation, and they're trying to make it sound like people are lazy. When I make the argument is those other people don't have the union protections that 6% has. So their only opportunity is to say, screw you, I'm leaving. They don't have the protection to go on strike, so they're leaving. So that's the message. Not that people are lazy or stupid or nobody wants to work. It's they don't want to work for the poverty, desperation wages, and the crummy conditions. Or at least that's my thought. What's yours, Laura?
Absolutely. We call workers essential, but we don't pay them essential wages, and we don't treat them like they are essential. We haven't raised the minimum wage since the 90s, and wages in general have been flat for decades. You see in the 70s where the money starts accumulating at the top, and the people who work for a living are just treading water. Two-income families just trying to stay afloat. So for a long, long time, things have been out of whack. And now finally, workers have some leverage. This pandemic has shown people that life is full of choices. And if you are working a shitty job, you don't have to make that choice. You can do better.
Yeah, the reality is they haven't, in the tip sector, they haven't raised the minimum wage since the 90s. Last time the federal government raised it was 2009, and that was, wasn't even enough then. Most certainly something we need to do again. Only two presidents since the minimum wage have been in place that didn't raise the minimum wage. Ronald Reagan, of course, and thanks to the Republicans, it didn't get done under the Obama term either. So for me, long overdue. But Rich, your thoughts on the activism we're seeing?
Well, first off, if you work and you're not a member of a union, you need to be one. And if your job doesn't have a union, then you need to get together and unionize. I think about the John Deere strike. What they basically showed is that they made record profits. And what they did was they raised the guy that was the main guy, they raised his salary 160%. The guy's making crazy money. But they looked at the workers and they said, hey, here's the deal. In 5 years, you'll make $1.85 more. So you start now at $10 an hour, and in 5 years you're going to be making $11.84. Not when the company's making that kind of profit. That right there shows you they're absolutely greedy, and the worker needs to stop allowing themselves to be mistreated, because at the end of the day, the most important thing in any organization is the worker, because without the worker, they get nothing. And until we show them that we'll let you starve before we let you starve us, that's how you get it. That's the power, and that's the power the people need.
No, absolutely. And you know, that strike, what I just found out here recently is the reason we need major comprehensive labor law reform is what's going on with this John Deere strike, because they filed an injunction against the workers. They can only have a handful of people on the picket line. So there goes your First Amendment right of free speech and the right to assemble. And only does that get to happen in labor strife. And look, the pendulum has swung way too far to the extreme on the corporate side. And again, this is why we need that major comprehensive labor law reform.
But let me jump in here also and say, though, that, you know, these union bosses, the union bosses need to be focused on taking care of the union members. You know, I'm telling you right now, as a person that was a state senator, union bosses will go behind the scenes and will work out their own sweet deals with some of these Republicans and people like that are anti-union. And that's a fact. Unions need to make sure that the union bosses have their best interests when they go represent them.
And we also need to make sure that elected officials stand up for unions. I worked for the AFL-CIO in 2009, trying to get the Employee Free Choice Act passed. And a particular senator or two, such as former Senator Blanche Lincoln, refused to help working people in Arkansas and in other states. And so now we have an opportunity again to pass labor law reform, to pass the PRO Act, but pay attention to how people vote and hold them to account if they do not vote for working people. No, absolutely. And look, we do need those elected officials. I mean, you go back and you think of some of the great quotes of leaders of the past. Abraham Lincoln, said labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could have never existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital and deserves a much higher consideration. And yet, that has not been the last 45 years. We've got all of the give corporations what they want, give the wealthy what they want, and even in the Build Back Somewhat Better plan, we can't tax corporate America, we can't tax the wealthy to pay for the things that we all agree need to have done. Sarah, I mean, at some point, you're going to reach this point where people have had enough. And I'm hoping this is that moment. I'm hoping it just isn't October. I'm hoping we come up with a cute name for November and another for December and January and February and all through next year, to where maybe we claw back some of the wealth that's been stolen from us over the last 45 years. Not going to take it November. I think the best thing we could do is have a national strike on Black Friday. And that would certainly send a message to corporate America and to Washington, because all of these guys really, really need Black Friday this year. Even though we've got a huge, issue with getting all of our goods in from all over the place, I think this is a really good opportunity too, where we can kind of put our money where our beliefs are and start investing in, or start buying products from companies that are good to their workers. We can, support people who, there's a whole website that's dedicated to things that you can buy that are union made and that are made in the USA, and ways that you can support working people instead of, sweatshops in China. And that would be a great way to do it. No, we desperately need that kind of militancy. And this, again, something I've been talking about for years on this program, the need for, a realization that, going back to the old Knights of Labor saying, a concern of one is a concern of all. This idea of an injury to one being an injury to all, and that we're all really in this together. Whether you're a consumer, a worker, or someone in an industry, we should be supporting each other. And I'm hoping we're in a moment, Rich, where maybe that kind of working class solidarity returns, not just to our language, but to our behavior. The John Deere strike that you brought up, they're limiting the number of people, the workers who could be on that picket line.
Every person in that community should be going to that picket line. Thousands of people, not associated with the company, because now you're not violating the injunction, but the community should be stepping in.
Absolutely. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do if we show up out there? Guess what? During the teacher strike in West Virginia in 2018, do you know what was not allowed? Teachers striking.
Right.
But guess what happened? 28,000 of them said, screw you, we're tired of this garbage. And they showed up at the Capitol. And in the end, after 5 days, they won. That's what you do. You know, you don't let these people try to tell you that you can't do something, because what they're basically saying is you can't do this, but we're going to let them do this to you anytime they want, and there's nothing you can do about it. You know, people need to stand together, and that's what needs to happen. And I'll tell you another thing, too. Unions need to support other unions. What won the teacher strike in West Virginia wasn't the 28,000 teachers. What won the teacher strike in West Virginia was when you walked outside the capital of West Virginia, not only did you see a sea of red and blue teachers' T-shirts, but you saw the United Mine Workers of America. You saw the Teamsters. You saw the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, carpenters, pipe fitters, boilermakers. They were all there. And let me tell you, that scared them legislators, because they knew if we don't do right by these teachers, we're not going to get none of the votes from all these other unions too. And that's exactly what you got to do. Send that message. I don't care. And I don't care about, you're not going to tell me what we can't do. I'm the guy that was told that I wasn't allowed to throw a brick through a window on a daggone picket line one time. But as far as I'm concerned, if you come to my backyard to take our jobs, you should get your ass whipped in the process.
I love your passion, and we need more people like Rich, most certainly. But Laura, you're the person who I defer to on a lot of healthcare issues. As the executive director of Healthcare Voter, we're seeing strikes in healthcare like we haven't seen in my lifetime. We're seeing, nurses on strike in Massachusetts, in Buffalo, New York. The workers and the nurses out in California, Kaiser Permanente, are about ready to go on strike. We're seeing during a pandemic, we're seeing healthcare workers go, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're tired of working these extreme hours. We're tired of the poverty wages. We're tired.
Mm-hmm. Right, because medical personnel, especially nurses, but everybody on down the line too, med techs, have been so overworked and underpaid for so long. And then this pandemic just compounded that, with people having to work double shifts, risking their life literally every time they entered their workplace. And there's all this trauma that's accumulated, and maybe people got a few pats on the back, and last year we called them heroes, and this year people refuse to wear a mask and they spit at nurses. So there's been all this trauma, and people have had enough. We need vastly more medical workers in this country, and we need to pay them fairly. Our healthcare system is broken in so many ways, and that's one of them. Yeah.
Sarah, as we've been seeing, we're talking about, you got John Deere workers, you got healthcare workers, you've got, food workers. I mean, you look at Kellogg's, Frito-Lay, Nabisco, you look at all of these strikes that have gone on. It isn't just an isolated industries. It's wide across industries. And, the industry that's the least unionized, they seem to be the ones striking the most. And that would be your restaurant workers, your service workers, hotel workers, those folks who have been abused for so long. They're just saying, done.
Which is fantastic. This is what they absolutely should have done a while ago. But right now is the best time to do it, because they, these restaurants and bars that have just barely been able to hang on through the pandemic, now that they're coming back, everybody wants to go out. They want to, especially, as we're heading into the fall and the weather's getting nice and it's not really hot and humid anymore. Everybody wants to be on a patio. And so I think this is a brilliant time for people to talk to their bosses and be like, let's renegotiate some of this, right? Because the companies are going to start making a heck of a lot more money. Yeah. And this is the best thing about folks that are, who are working in this industry right now. They're desperate for servers and for bartenders right now. So this is like, you have the power right now. So by golly, use it.
Yeah. And the reason I bring this up is because, right now, if we had Joe Manchin on board, if you had Kirsten Sinema on board, we could pass, major comprehensive labor law reform that would give people the ability to organize, to join and form unions, and to fight for those better wages, hours, conditions, even in industries like the restaurant industry, where you could have some type of sectorial bargaining to where you would set the standards across the board and not allow the kind of cutthroat competition that goes on there, and they compete on which workers are willing to work for poverty wages. Because back to you, Laura, the last time we raised the minimum wage for the tip workers on the federal level, they raised it up to a whopping $2.13 an hour, which is what still the federal minimum wage for tipped workers in this country is. That is disgraceful. It's despicable, and it's the reason I'm hoping that all of these people dropping out will come back and want to organize.
And I'm here in Las Vegas this week, as you can see, lovely Las Vegas. And Las Vegas is really a testament to the power of worker organizing.
The culinary union.
The restaurant that I ate at yesterday in the casino is unionized. And so I was talking with a culinary union employee the other day, and they still haven't brought everybody back. The culinary workers are not 100% back. But they have protections in place, so they will get first callbacks as more jobs open. Yep. And these are good union jobs. You can make a living as a server in Las Vegas, and you can raise a family there, and that's because of the power of the union here.
That's it right there in a nutshell. Guys, I got to take a quick break right here. Laura Packard, Sarah Burris, Rich Ojeda, stick around. We're going to be right back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1926. That was the day that one of the great labor leaders in U.S. history, Eugene V. Debs, died in Elmhurst, Illinois. In 1894, Debs gained national attention when his American Railway Union launched a boycott in support of the striking workers of the Pullman Palace Car Company. The strike and the boycott were crushed by federal troops and a federal court. Debs served 6 months in jail for his role in the boycott. Later, Debs would again go to jail for standing up for his beliefs. He was convicted for speaking out against U.S. involvement in World War I. He was among the founders of the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, in 1905. He ran as a socialist for President of the United States 5 times, receiving nearly 1 million votes running his campaign from a prison cell in 1920. In 1891, Debs wrote an article for the Locomotive Fireman's magazine titled The Unity of Labor. His words stand as an eloquent case for worker solidarity. Debs wrote, quote, "If working men were united in sympathetic bonds, if a bricklayer could comprehend the fact that he is dependent on the hod carrier, if the locomotive engineer could grasp the fact that he is dependent on the locomotive fireman, the interdependence of labor would at once constitute a bond of union, a chain whose link, forged and fashioned to hold working men in harmonious alliance, would girt them with a defense in every time of trouble and resist invasion, though assailed by all the plutocrats that ever cursed the earth." Debs spent his life trying to bring about this harmonious alliance of working people and standing up for the causes of peace and justice. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, the last several months have been peaceful, especially on social media since the former guy got banned with all of his insanity. But today, it turns out that the Trump Media and Technology Group, they are now coming out with a new social media platform just so the former guy can have a platform. Evidently, the new social media network will be titled Truth Social. There isn't a joke there other than the fact that the whole thing's a damn joke. I mean, there's no punchline other than Trump has started something called Truth Social. Wow. Here to share some thoughts on the new platform, our all-star panel of Rich Ojeda from No Dems Left Behind, Laura Packard from Healthcare Voter, and of course Sarah Burris from RawStory. Guys, what do you think? We've got this new social media platform. Everyone rushing to get their handle in the new platform. Let's start with you, Laura.
Well, it's clear from the blatant copying that Trump is desperate to be back on Twitter, where he was thrown off after January 6th. And I find it ironic that he blocked me on Twitter a few years ago, but he is gone and I'm still there. So that is clearly eating away at Trump every day, which is why he's come up with this clone. But also he's just trying to monetize his own things. So this seems like some kind of a scam.
And he feels like he's got to have something he can dominate. But we're on Twitter. You tweet, Facebook. You post some stuff. What will we be doing on Truth Social, Sarah?
You post a truth. So instead of a tweet, it is a truth, and then you can retruth that. I think one of the most important things that people need to know about this site is that it is just in beta testing right now. So if you go on to Truth Social and get the account of, say, Devin Nunes or Matt Gaetz or any other Republican elected official, that is totally fine for you to do. Already somebody who is not Mike Pence, a guy who works, I think, for the Daily Dot, got at Mike Pence. A guy who works for the Washington Post got at Donald Trump. So the president, his own social media site, he has to be at Donald J. Trump. And then within, I think it was maybe 2 hours of Donald Trump Jr. announcing it on Fox News, the website was hacked. Somebody took over Donald J. Trump's account and posted a hog with some sort of tumor coming out of its behind. Very unclear. And so presumably they have fixed some of the security issues. But I think the plan is that for this to, what Jason Miller, one of Trump's old aides, said, is that the goal for his social media site, Getter, or whatever it's called, I'm not really, but it's spelled Getter. Getter and Truth are apparently trying to steal the market share from Facebook and Twitter. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure a lot of people are going to leave Facebook and Twitter just, to get on Getter.
You're going to get her truth. Instead of get her done, we're get her truth.
I guess.
Wow. And do you have your social media handle there? Does anyone have a truth account now?
I didn't, because I'm scared to. Like, they're combing your data. And so if you're going to do it, I will tell everybody, make sure you've got a VPN on. Use an email account that you don't use with anybody else. And be very conscious of how much information and data you're putting in there, because it's gonna get stolen. It's gonna get sold.
Yeah, I don't think America can handle the truth.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, first off, Donald Trump and the word truth should never be used in the same sentence. I would not put it past Donald Trump to sell people's information, because that's what he does. This is going to become another Parler 2.0. All these jackaloons out there are going to rush to that because they think that they're going to be able to help their orange Lord and Savior Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, it's going to become a big joke. It's going to be a failure, because everything Donald Trump does, that's the one thing about it, it's going to fail, and that's where we're going.
Yeah.
So it's going to wind up like Parler. It's going to be full of white supremacists and hate and porn.
Yeah.
But there is one rule in the terms of services: is you cannot use excessive capital letters. I swear to you that it says that in the terms of service. You can post pornography. You can post things that are absolutely untrue. You cannot attack Donald Trump, the website, or post in all caps.
I guess you got to have priorities, right?
Yeah.
Gonna be. I now got to race over and get a Truth account because I had a Parler account because I want to see what crazy people are posting. I now want to see what the truth is. I want to see just how badly we've perverted the truth. I guess alternate truth. That would have been a better name, I think.
Well, I think some of it's going to be really exciting. Like she said, somebody has already basically took the Donald J. Trump and the Donald Trump. So I can see a lot of very, very skilled hackers going in there and just making their life a living hell.
And good.
And I'm cool with that.
It's what we need. It's absolutely what we need. But again, how do you start a platform and allow your name in any form to be taken by anyone else? I mean, if you're just critically thinking at the executive skills of the former guy, do you not go, any iteration of my name should be off limits? Shouldn't that be the first thing you do?
And you would think this is something that the investors who Trump is inevitably going to go after should probably think about as they are looking at this social networking site. If the guy who runs it can't even get his account together, then really, do you want to put some money into that?
Well, I'm sure he's going to raise money off of the stupid. I'm sure that's coming because this week we saw the passing of Colin Powell, partially because of COVID, partially because of a disease that he had. But the former guy, being ever presidential, put out a fundraising request with the statement, "Wonderful to see Colin Powell, who made big mistakes in Iraq and famously so-called weapons of mass destruction, be treated in death so beautifully by the fake news media. Hope that happens to me someday." He was a classic rhino, even that always being the first to attack other Republicans. He made plenty of mistakes, but anyway, may he rest in peace. Oh, by the way, donate to my PAC. Which you go, hold on, the guy's dead. You're going to try and raise money off of a dead guy that you just trashed? Wow. Rich, thoughts?
Well, first off, what he said basically showed that Donald Trump doesn't have the capability to be a good human being. He doesn't. There's nothing that he can't be it. And everybody out there, to me, there's so many things that he has done that should make people say, I'm out. I'm out. This is just another one of those opportunities where people out there that are following Donald Trump, that know that he's absolutely not the right person, but you committed to him. This is another opportunity for you. We're giving you another out to basically say that you're done. Colin Powell served for 34 years in the military, started at the bottom as a brand new second lieutenant, made his way to 4-star general. He was born in a time when he had to drink from a different water fountain and ride in the back of the bus, and he climbed all the way to the highest position that you can hold in the United States military. He was a brilliant staff officer. It's amazing he never ran for president, and I believe that if he would have had a really good shot at actually winning it. He was loved by many, millions of people. And just to see this come from Donald Trump, it bothered me, but then again, what do you expect?
Yep.
You can expect that kind of garbage with Donald Trump. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw recently where they also sent messages out to all the Trump supporters that basically threatened them that if they didn't donate within 17 minutes, they were going to be looked at as a traitor, to the Donald Trump. And it was a really messed up message that went out to all of the Trump fans. But even Donald Trump does that. He uses that tactic. When are these people going to wake up?
Sadly, they don't. But very presidential. But great. Hey, we've got a guy who knows no depth. So there's no bottom to that barrel. Starting his own social media in a time when social media, I'm hoping people are waking up, especially looking at Facebook's problems. And I guess there's a possibility that we could be changing Facebook's name. Maybe, Laura, your thoughts on what could that name look like?
Well, I guess Truth is off the market, so it's not going to be that. Just want to mention one thing about Colin Powell. He died of COVID, but he was also battling a form of blood cancer, and that's why he was immunosuppressed. And even though he was vaccinated, it wasn't enough. And this is just one more reason why we have to make sure that everyone is vaccinated, because we need to protect people like Colin Powell and like all of the millions of Americans that are immunocompromised, that if they get this thing, it will kill them. And so vaccinations are more important than ever.
No, I'm right there with you. It's something we definitely need. But on the Facebook front, because a lot of the misinformation, a lot of the disinformation has come from places like Facebook, some of these crazy social media sites. Thoughts?
I feel like if you're going to change the company name because it's so toxic, maybe you should just fix your company. I mean, maybe I'm crazy. And it just seems like the better idea, that because it doesn't matter if you change it from Facebook to Book Your Face or whatever. In another couple of years, it's going to be another toxic brand, and you're going to have to keep changing it over and over and over again until finally you're just like, oh, gee, maybe there's something wrong with us.
Well, changing the name doesn't fix anything. I mean, it's still a toxic organization. They got to go in there and they got to fix what makes them toxic. And Mark Zuckerberg has to be willing to realize, that he's part of that problem. So, yeah.
Right. They changed the name of Blackwater, but that didn't make it any less blackwatery.
There you go. Perfect example. Perfect example. Last thing I want to get to. This week we saw this Oleg Deripaska's 2 properties raided here in the U.S., one in Washington, one in New York. Everyone knows Oleg Deripaska, one of Putin's right-hand folks, a Russian oligarch, someone that, in bed with with Paul Manafort and a lot of the stuff that went on there. Why now? Let's start with you, Sarah, as the reporter of the group. Why now? Why this? Why now?
That is a very, very good question. Why now? Because when the Treasury Department ushered in sanctions for Russians and specifically for Oleg Deripaska, why isn't that why weren't his assets seized, or at the very least put on hold when all of that happened? Why isn't this guy basically buying up properties in New York and Washington and still functioning in the United States whenever the country basically said, oh, gee, there's some issues going on here with Russia. So that's a very good question. Why now? I think the answer for part of it is we actually have somebody in the Justice Department who cares about the law and enforcing it for people that aren't Donald Trump's BFFs or supporters. So I think that's part of it, but I'd like to see a little bit more into the question for, why this took as long as it did.
No, I mean, that's the thing that got me. I'm like, why now all of a sudden? Rich, obviously you're a military guy, strategy, something you understand. Strategically, I can't imagine they found anything in those properties. At least I got to assume that, the Russian oligarch is smart enough not to bring things that into the U.S. that can be found in these houses. But could this just be one of those message things that go, hey, we're paying attention, we're watching, and we can screw with you here whenever we want to?
Well, I think that's probably what it is. But at the end of the day, too, the guy's connected to Paul Manafort. So, we have no idea. Maybe on Paul Manafort's side, there's some information that they've got that showed that this guy has, been involved in other things, to include, the Trump presidency. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we need to have investigations in these folks, because they've done some serious damage. They've done a lot of damage to this country. And if we don't stop this, if we don't find out where the issues are and literally crush it, then it's going to happen again. It's kind of like, if you don't punish a failed coup, you can basically guarantee you're going to have another one.
Right.
If we don't stand up and do something with this Russian money and with these, these people that have come here that have absolutely participated in our elections, then we can expect it to get worse down the road, and we can't do that.
No, I'm right there with you. It's all about the money.
Yeah, we almost lost it.
Let me throw this out to the whole group, though, because we lived through the era of Robert Mueller is coming. The Mueller investigation is going to take down the former guy. It was all about the Mueller for a very long time, and what we got was kind of a nice, 400 and some page report that was to go here, do something. Is this part of that doing something? Could this be part of maybe someone acting on what came out of the Mueller report?
I hope so.
Well,
I really do.
I wonder how much of this is also linked to the Panama Papers. I haven't looked through to see if Oleg Deripaska's name is in it, but this is a lot of what he's doing is money laundering, and these are financial related crimes, from what I understand.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a little bit of a tip off. But the thing about the Mueller investigation is really there's the people at the top still haven't had some heads roll on that stuff, and
Well, we had members of the Senate. Absolutely, the two from Georgia, Purdue and Loeffler, that absolutely participated in insider trading, and it looks like they're going to get a freebie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a problem. We're starting to realize that I guess we do have people in this country that are above the law.
Yep, I'm right there with you guys. I appreciate the time. Great panel as always. I look forward to having you all back next time around. Thanks so much.
Airborne.
Our all-star panel of Rich Ojeda, No Dems Left Behind, Sarah Burris of RawStory, and healthcare voters, Laura Packard. Again, if you missed any of today's program, you can download the podcast there at thericksmithshow.com. Love to hear your thoughts, your ideas. Are there topics our all-star panel should be picking up? Most certainly reach out, tell us what you think. Give us the information. Love having it. Again, make sure you check out the program, thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.